like the rest of the country, Youngstown Mahoning Valley was all in on supporting the war effort of both the U.S. and the Allies who were fighting Nazi Germany, Italy, and Japan. But a major part besides steel production and other product production for the war effort, and all the thousands of local men and women who went into the service and left the area during the war, was to finance all these efforts. And of course the war bonds of that period, 1941 to 45, were a very key way to do that in terms of providing a capital for the United States government to pay for all the material and costs that went into prosecuting this war. And so you saw war bond drives going on that involved celebrities who came to town. Eleanor Roosevelt was here promoting war bonds. Marlene Dietrich was here promoting war bonds, and the steel company executives were side by side with them, urging local people to buy bonds. The Youngstown Playhouse had a war bond drive at their theater so that people could come out and hear why it was important, possibly be entertained, but the thing was for people to buy these bonds with the guarantee that they would receive their money back plus interest once the war was over. A lot of changes happened quickly. First of all, the war period provided women many opportunities to work outside of the home, to take over for men who had gone into service, and that went right into the steel mill floors in terms of operating mills and equipment and running tow motors, whatever was needed to do. And I think a lot of women got a taste for working. They would normally have not had that opportunity, but once the war was over and the men were coming back from service, it was understood that they were going to get their jobs back. And so you had shall we say, a resetting of society in many ways to where it was before, but at this point, right after the war, you had a lot of pent-up consumer demand in terms of Youngstown's population was at its highest in this period, high 160,000 to 170,000. The whole city as we know it today was not developed yet, and so people were living on top of each other. Multiple families were living together in large homes, and so you began to see a merchandise and home building and all kinds of booms in the consumer economy.
Alfred A. Chambers would become the new Playhouse president as 1944 began. Janie was on stage at the Playhouse with a top ticket price of $1.80. Talbot Pearson, who arrived at the Playhouse in late 1943, was now suddenly gone, and Richard N. Gage would serve as his replacement. Curtain Time would become the new name for the Playhouse Playbill publication. Productions of Claudia and Wings Over Europe on the Playhouse stage drew crowds to the Market Street Theater. Wings Over Europe would hold special significance in future years as being the stage debut for local actor Joseph A. Flynn in the role of Faulkner. Flynn, a graduate of Youngstown's Rayen High School, would appear several times on the Playhouse stage. He would be one of the first Playhouse actors to move on to a professional acting career by appearing in numerous films and television shows, including the ABC TV sitcom McHale's Navy from 1962 to 1966. Other Playhouse actors were also beginning to achieve star status with local audiences. Wanda Lou Davis and James Merv Jones would team up in Pursuit of Happiness in 1945 and would become two favorite personalities on the Playhouse stage. Richard Gage's tenure at the Playhouse would be brief with his departure in less than 1 year from his hiring. Harvey T. Warren would replace Gage. Warren, a close friend of Monty Woolley of The Man Who Came to Dinner fame, was a strong believer in community theater. His first Playhouse production, Shaw's Fanny's First Play, would be very successful, but his second, Three's a Family, would launch the careers of two future Youngstown Playhouse legends, John Abbey and John Griffith. It would also be Warren who would institute the idea of playhouse productions being regularly reviewed by the local newspaper, the Youngstown Vindicator. Reviews up to that time had been sporadic. Fred Childress would write his first review for Tell It Not in Gath in 1946 and eventually become a household name in Youngstown. As the 1948-49 season opened, Warren would vanish from the Playhouse, setting the stage for the hiring of Arthur Sircom as the next director. Sircom was by far the most accomplished Playhouse director to date, with numerous Broadway directing credits. A native of Boston and a Yale graduate, Sircom brought a whole new level of professionalism to the Playhouse. He also worked frequently with Noel Coward at the Cape Playhouse in Dennis, Massachusetts.
You had Arthur Sircom here. Arthur Sircom was a Broadway, off-Broadway regional theater director, well respected by everybody. He was a good friend of Uta Hagen and Herb Berghoff, her husband. They were very close. And Arthur was the first one to bring a professional level to the Playhouse.
Well, first of all, Arthur was an older guy who had done New York directing. And for some reason or other, I don't know how, but they got in touch with him, and he came in. There was some good things and some not comfortable things, but he was a teacher. He actually wanted things to be done very well, and if you did a line or something, didn't do it, he'd stop you and get you back in it. And it was something, as you were an actor at a community theater, had not gone through. Nobody had done that with us before. I even noticed that today on some stages. You don't bring a director in like that. Oh, no. This guy, everything, the lines you did, the thing you said, what you did. Then we would meet after and go through exercises as an actor, and he would make us do it. He really made that good. He was tyrannical. And I remember one time, I think this actually happened, but I can't give you 100% accuracy. Some kind of a show that he was not happy about finally had the opening night. And the show starts, and in the back of the house you hear somebody saying, "Pull the curtain, pull the curtain, that is no good. They didn't do that right." They closed the damn curtain. After the show had started, he walked up and went back on the stage and said, "What the hell are you doing? You're supposed to do this."
Sircom was a no-nonsense type of director, and although some refused to work with him, most at the Playhouse learned a great deal from him. His production of The Hasty Heart in 1948 would be the first to feature the future legendary duo of John Griffith and Rennie Turnello. It would also be the first Playhouse production to feature a black actor on stage in the person of Frank Stewart. Sircom also had another first in his pocket in 1949, as he acquired the rights to the Ruth and Augustus Getz play, The Heiress, the first non-professional production of the play anywhere in the United States. He scored major successes the rest of the season with productions of The Magnificent Yankee, Two Blind Mice, The Corn is Green, and A Silver Whistle before leaving the Playhouse to return to the Cape Playhouse. But this would be far from the last time that Sircom would direct a Playhouse production. While a feeble attempt was made for his replacement using guest directors, Sircom took firm hold of the situation in 1950, sending a reluctant Harry Ellerby to the Playhouse to direct Over 21. Ellerby was no slouch, having directed Judy Holliday in her Broadway debut in Kiss Them For Me, but he was not excited about working with amateur actors until he saw the talent at the Playhouse. But Ellerby was only there for one production. With a production of Darker the Moon looming on the horizon, Sircom would enlist the services of fellow director and good friend Ella Gerber. Gerber had just directed Charlton Heston in Design for a Stained Glass Window in New York. It would mark the first time a woman occupied the director's chair at the Playhouse.
I learned some things from her, from Ella. And you never knew if she liked you or she didn't like you. But opening night, you'd always get a gift and a little personal note from her. She was a great director. I loved her. And of course, people don't know this. She was the only woman that was permitted to direct Porgy and Bess.
Yeah. Sometimes people get a little big-headed in the theater, okay? We have egos that sometimes get beyond us. So if you started out, when I started out, you didn't have an ego. I worked for a director, Ella Gerber, who was a tyrant. And she said in our first rehearsal, leave your ego at the door. There's no room for it here.
By all accounts, Gerber was a taskmaster. She had no time nor patience for anything less than professional behavior from her actors. As a result, Dark of the Moon was the biggest hit to date at the Playhouse. It ushered in the debuts of Rod MacDonald, Paul Herman, and Carol Russo. Sircom would return to direct a production of I Remember Mama, which would feature Joe Flynn. As usual with a Sircom show, it was a hit. But Sircom seldom stayed long, and following the show, he was off again. With the Glass Menagerie featuring Helen Moyer, Wanda Lou and Merv Jones, and Alexander Duncan Jr. leading off the 1951-52 season, Gerber returned to the director's chair. With her high standards well in hand, Gerber kept an eagle eye on actors during rehearsals. Noticing conduct during a rehearsal which she firmly disagreed with, she leaped on stage, stating firmly,
"I'm not going to have anyone bitch up my show for me."
The show was an unqualified hit, but once the show was over, Gerber was gone again, with Sircom returning to finish off the season. The Playhouse had been so successful to this point that memberships rose to 3,700 season tickets, and performance runs were extended from 11 to 15 performances. During the 1953-1954 season, however, reality would creep into the Playhouse. With a current show in rehearsal causing problems for actors, Sircom canned the show for something easier for the actors to grasp in a short time. The result was a production of Western Union plays by acclaimed playwrights Albert Hackett and Francis Goodrich. Disaster loomed as the show would go down in Playhouse history as the worst show ever produced at the Youngstown Playhouse. John Yoder, a cast member, stated that it was so bad that they were lucky the audience didn't throw things at the actors on stage. Even Vindicator critic Fred Childress added his disdain in his review, stating, quote, "I thought the theater had outgrown comedies like Western Union plays. If it hasn't, I certainly have," unquote. With the Playhouse turning away 50 people per night at most performances, it became clear that they were outgrowing the Market Street Theater. Sircom began lobbying then-President Edwin L. Stanley for a new and larger Youngstown Playhouse. To prove his point, Sircom staged a production of Amal and the Night Visitors with the Youngstown Philharmonic Orchestra and a 40-voice community choir. The show was much too large for the Market Street Theater, so it was staged at another larger venue in December of 1953. It also marked the first time the Playhouse would stage a musical. This production would also mark the stage debut of John Dumaine at the Playhouse, a name that would become synonymous with Playhouse quality. With the success of this production and the obvious need for more space, the Playhouse Board announced plans at the end of the season to build a new 500-seat theater.